Yo, what is up guys, Staleboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So this past weekend, of course, Anthony Joshua fought Robert Helenius, ended up knocking him out in the 7th rounds in what was, let's be honest, an unconvincing performance. And I think anybody with an ounce of objectivity would have been critical of Anthony Joshua's performance. There were things he was doing that, in my opinion, signified that he's a man who is low on confidence, unsure as to when to let go of his right hand, despite the opportunities being there throughout the fight, especially after the 3rd round. But Joshua seemed very unwilling to let go of his power shots. And don't get me wrong, you should always be aware of what could come back when you're throwing shots, I get that. But to me with Joshua, it was just too cautious. I felt he looked too tentative, plus the issues he had with Robert Helenius' jab. He was getting caught by that jab all night long. And again, this was against a Robert Helenius who was 39 years old. His chin has completely gone, way past his best, doesn't have great stamina. And he was really there, you know, he did better than I expected, but he wasn't really letting go of crazy hard power shots or going for the knockout. Looking back on the fight, I felt Helenius should have been dispatched a lot earlier than he was, and I think that just signified Joshua's lack of self-belief and confidence right now. But anyway, I was watching the fight, and I picked up on these issues in Joshua's game immediately, as most people did. But Tony Bellew on the commentary team, do you know what he reminded me of? If you've seen that meme, it's like a cartoon meme, and there's the dog sitting in a room that's on fire, and the dog's like, everything is fine. That was Tony Bellew's energy on commentary for this fight. No matter the amount of jabs that Robert Helenius was able to land, you know, damaging the face of Anthony Joshua, bloodying his nose, swelling his eye. The shots were clearly landing, and the jab was landing throughout the whole fight for Robert Helenius, to a worrying extent, I would say. Plus, on top of that, Joshua's unwillingness to fire his right hand and get himself in distance to throw that shot. Very cautious approach, and in the meantime, he dropped a couple of rounds to Robert Helenius. Despite that, Tony Bellew was not critical in the slightest of Anthony Joshua's performance. Tony Bellew was under the impression that Anthony Joshua was always in control, looking good, working on new things, you know, that he was basically carrying Robert Helenius. That's basically what Tony Bellew said on commentary. And any success that Robert Helenius did have was essentially because Joshua was trying new things in there. It wasn't because of Joshua's deficiencies, defensive flaws, confidence issues, things of that nature. Nothing to do with that. It was purely Joshua working on things. Tony Bellew truly is a dreadful, awful commentator, a terrible boxing analyst, and all in all he's really good for is being a brown-noser. That's all he's really good for. He is the matchroom cheerleader. That is Tony Bellew's role. He's not a boxing analyst. He's not a commentator. He's a cheerleader. That's all he is. And once again, we saw that, or we heard that, on the Anthony Joshua commentary. That's all we heard. It got to a point after Tony Bellew basically said that AJ was carrying Helenius. Andy Lee almost burst out laughing. That's what it sounded like. And Andy Lee, by the way, he toes the line, but Tony Bellew's commentary was even getting a bit much for Andy Lee. Andy Lee's not a good commentator. He's not exactly the most unbiased in the world, I would say. And yeah, Tony Bellew once again made an absolute fool of himself on commentary. The level of dick sucking is unbelievable, quite frankly. And it makes me raise the question, I don't care whether this guy was a fighter, this, that and the other. You know, he showed in some fights he was tough, I get it, cool, former world champion, etc. But what does it matter if you have no dignity? What does it matter? Tony Bellew, what he sounded like was a pro AJ YouTube channel who happened to commentate on DAZN that weekend. That's what he sounded like. No objectivity, no critical analysis of Joshua's deficiencies in this fight. None of that at all. It was all fine, according to Tony Bellew. It was all fine. Despite this fight being basically the warm-up to the Deontay Wilder fight. And if Joshua has those same flaws in the Wilder fight, there's a very high likelihood he's going to get knocked out by Deontay Wilder. And to me, that's why the performance was concerning. You know, if this was a performance where Joshua and his teams said they're going to have a long rebuild, it's going to take 4 or 5 fights, I wouldn't be quite so harsh on the performance. But apparently he's fighting Deontay Wilder next. And with that in mind, what we saw is going to get him knocked out. More than likely. It will get him knocked out. But Tony Bellew can't bear to think of that thought. Tony Bellew is a Matchroom cheerleader, an AJ cheerleader. And once again, he offers the paying customer absolutely nothing in regards to his insights into boxing. Nothing at all. What can you learn from Tony Bellew on commentary? There are certain commentators or analysts, you listen to them speak, and it makes you reconsider your opinions, or it can make you see something that you didn't previously see. Paulie Malignaggi is a good commentator. That guy doesn't get work though because, you know, to his credit, for the most part, he calls it like it is. Do you think if that was Paulie Malignaggi on commentary, he'd be saying, oh, AJ's carrying Hellenius? No, of course not. He'd have been critical, just like any regular boxing fan who doesn't have a dog in the race would be critical. But Tony Bellew is not capable of that. The man's an absolute disgrace. He's not capable of going against the Matchroom narrative. He can't be objective. And if you're a boxing commentator or analyst, then that should be your main job, right? Is to be objective and to call it like it is. Call it down the middle. But again, Tony Bellew just is not capable of that. And how this guy still has a job is beyond me. He is absolutely terrible at it. Well, he's terrible at his official job title, commentator, analyst. He's terrible at that. What he's really good at is sucking dick and blowing smoke and gassing up home fighters. That's what he's good for. That's all he's good for, is being Matchroom's in-house pom-pom waver. That's what he is. That's what Tony Bellew is. What a sad sight. I almost feel sorry for the guy to have that little dignity, that you can carry on like that, making an absolute fool of yourself. I actually feel sorry for him. Who knows, man? Maybe that's why Joshua's not been looking good recently. Maybe this like obsession from Tony Bellew is starting to get to him. Maybe he feels uncomfortable with Tony Bellew ringside. Maybe that's Joshua's issue. Maybe we've solved it. I don't know. But yeah, Bellew's obsession with AJ is just extremely weird. And listen, he's a homer for most Matchroom fighters, but with AJ, it is a different level. A different level. I think this guy needs to lose his job. I don't think he's good enough. I don't think he offers the customer anything whatsoever in terms of insight and objective analysis. He does none of that. Maybe we need to get a social media campaign going to try and oust Tony Bellew from his role on DAZN. Maybe we need to get a movement going. We could call it Boycott Bellew, something like that. Hashtag Boycott Bellew. The guy's an absolute disgrace, but I feel like I've made this video multiple times before. So listen, I doubt anything changes, but yeah, let's start it trending. Boycott Bellew, hashtag Boycott Bellew, and yeah, let's get this guy out, man, because it's getting embarrassing at this point. And quite frankly, DAZN's coverage in the UK in general is pretty poor in terms of commentary and things of that nature, but Tony Bellew is the worst. Every time I watch a Matchroom show in the UK, it feels like a big old boys club, you know? Just a big old boys club. Because Darren Barker's not a good commentator. He's not. But having said that, compared to Tony Bellew, I mean, Tony Bellew makes him look somewhat good, so what the fuck do I know? But yeah, I'm tired of watching these shows and just being bombarded with absolute propaganda from the likes of Tony Bellew. Sick and tired of it. Just be honest, just be objective. I understand all of these networks have their biases, I get it, but with DAZN UK, it just feels like a different level of like dick riding. That's what it feels like to me, just a different level, and it's so unprofessional, to be honest. It's so unprofessional. I hate listening to it. I wish DAZN had the option where you could just listen to the fight with no commentary. You hear the sounds, but not of commentary. That'll be ideal. But yeah, that'll never happen, because I think they'd realise how many people can't stand the commentary team on DAZN. But it is what it is. Share your thoughts below. Beanie Guy Delboy, peace.